Hello, my name is Yuri Vela and I would like to walk you through my master dissertation project called Red Hook Reconnected, Territorial Bridgings in the Vacant Lots Geography. This thesis was carried out at the KU Leuven Faculty of Architecture under the supervision of my promotor, Professor Kris Scheerlinck, within the Streetscape Territories research project framework. Red Hook is one of the earliest neighbors in New York City, located on a peninsula in the southwest tip of Brooklyn. It has a long history related to the working waterfront as a part of the New York City harbor. In the 1850s, the Atlantic Basin was opened for the first time and Red Hook became one of the busiest and most important ports in the country. In 1939, Robert Moses, also known as the Master Builder, started the project of Gowanus Expressway as a part of Interstate 278 communication. It created this boundary separating Red Hook from the Keller Gardens and the rest of Brooklyn. People are sometimes also relating to Gowanus Expressway as to the Chinese Wall. Its separation, caused by the cutting of infrastructure of Gowanus Expressway and poor interconnection with the New York public transport system, creates this certain disconnection, which makes Red Hook so special and diverse in comparison with any other part of Brooklyn. Back in November in 2017, this was the first couple of words I wrote down about my observations. They served me as a backbone throughout the whole process of my master dissertation. Streetscape of Red Hook radiates with potential, mysterious no man's lands filled with old car wrecks and silently asking for a new purpose to ignite the new life and serve the surrounding inhabitants, a potential spark of life. The gradient of life and work in such a raw and its genuine form is something I encountered in these streets. People move within the buildings and the streets like it's a natural continuation of building. It's not just a corridor, but another full-fledged room. Doors are left open because there's really no point in closing them during the day, since someone is constantly moving through in and out. Streets merge into the buildings and vice versa. By the combination of the technique of collage and sketching, I retraced my journey through the Nelson Street and West 9th Street, where my whole research started. I focused on everything which formulates the architectural language of the streetscape and its characteristics. The process of creation of these maps exposes the very strong relation between the architecture and the added layer of appropriation. Each street has its unique appeal due to this layer added on top of the universal base of generic architecture, easily interchangeable with the immediate vicinity. This conceptual model illustrates the frail morphological connection between the urban blocks and the linear infrastructure of the urban grid. Tentacles of the open space are crawling through the realm of built environment, while almost completely erasing the urban grid and just leaving hardly recognizable traces of it. These blank spots and vacancies within the urban block are formed into cul-de-sacs, vacant corners and empty lots, cutting through the blocks, implying new possible interconnections. To further investigate these relations of different vacant lots and their morphology and other characteristics, I created the adaptation of the Nolly map. It showed that the original urban grid is not completely relevant in the urban context of Red Hook, and if we start questioning the permeability of the empty lots, the whole concept of the grid is slowly evaporating. This puts a question to how we look at the movement within the urban fabric, especially slow mobility, in the current context, and what are the potential transformations and improvements for the future. From the observations and research, I came to design decisions which were crucial for my next process of creating the architectural intervention, considering the pivotal scale condition of the neighborhood. By allocating all of the underutilized and vacant lots within the urban blocks of Red Hook, their ubiquity within the area came to understanding. The walls determining the blocks of Red Hook give a very porous and ambiguous feel. The matrix of the newly discovered geography offers new models of spatial syntax and slow mobility connections, contradicting the urban grid as a given condition primarily design and scale of a pace of a moving car. The goal of this intervention is to allow a completely new way of movement in the urban environment of Red Hook and reconnect the identities of each urban block to the public realm and streetscape on different levels, focusing on vacant lots and their reconnection with the building units and the streets forming the new pedestrian infrastructure. This intervention is becoming part of the pre-existing conditions and creating bonds between the voluntarily shared spaces. I came to the conclusion that the unifying urban strategy for the whole neighborhood of Red Hook is too generalizing and would suppress its richness and variability. Therefore, I'm proposing a series of modest intervention sequences which can be easily set up in the different morphologies of each of the urban block, using similar principles, by respecting and enhancing all the potentials, different actors, and site specifics. To allow myself to demonstrate this approach and to be fully capable to depict and describe all of the aspects of my design in this defined environment, I decided to focus my design process on two strategical sequences of the urban blocks. The two blocks at the northern edge of Red Hook, represented by the Gowanus Expressway, are forming a rich mixture of different functions and actors. It is one of the few places from where you can actually enter the whole neighborhood and get its first impression. By opening the vacant lots, which have been not in use for more than 20 years, in combination with introducing a new system of vertical and horizontal infrastructures, the whole spatial syntax of this area can be reconfigured. Two main spinal passages are cutting through the blocks and allowing new way of access for the inhabitants. In the first one, between Coles and Locker Street, I proposed the new possible connections, opening up the access to the back gardens of the dwellers on the ground level, in combination with vertical and horizontal connections of the inner facade with the existing fire escape staircases. Also by an addition of a safety ladder on the column on the old billboard, which is not in use anymore, can turn into observation deck of the whole neighborhood. The big part of the second block is occupied by tank maintenance industry, which appropriates a big part of the adjacent lot nowadays. The added cross-shaped footbridge structure reorganizes these vacancies between 4 different actors and give each one of them the possibility to appropriate and interact with the space depending on their current needs and program. The second sequence I decided to demonstrate my intervention on is in these new rediscovered geographies of the vacant lots, and very similar to the previous one, but also very different as all the urban blocks of this neighborhood has their unique character. The variety would even suffice for a small settlement, so it gives this block a feel of the independent unit. There's a small shop, pharmacy, a church, high school, small workshops, dwellings, and many more. In this case, I also introduce a main spinal walkway cutting through the block within the vacant lots and reconnecting all the inhabitants, allowing them to climb down onto these lots and use them initially to navigate through and secondarily to appropriate them based on their own needs. It is all based on the voluntary engagement and teamwork. In the first block, the intention is to get rid of the redundant fences and substitution of some of those with more permeable ones, which I describe more thoroughly in the next 2 chapters. The big building next to the Conover Street serves as a social housing unit nowadays. By addition of the vertical communication and transformation of a couple of windows to doors, the roof is made accessible and a new entering is introduced, allowing to go straight down to the inner green retreat of the block with flower beds and tall trees. In the second block, the opening of the adjacent cluster of the South Brooklyn Community High School can serve not only to its students and teachers, but also to the inhabitants of the rest of the block. The next scope of my intervention is the domestic scale. By zooming into partial elements of my intervention, I am going deeper into detail of all the relationships within the blocks. As a response to that, I propose new territorial bridges, creating a new string of pathways. Zooming in allows me to investigate all the adjacent neighbors and buildings. Next 4 drawings are accompanied by the couple of stories I thought of while making them. Tonight I finally climbed on top of that black old billboard. It was so calm, with all the stress rushing behind my back, people in their metal coffins going nowhere at 60 miles per hour. I just sat there, maybe for like an hour, just watching over the neighborhood, as an old guardian watching the shore from the lighthouse. When I closed my eyes, I could imagine the sound of passing cars, being the waves breaking over the cliffs of Red Hook. It felt like everything just stopped for a moment, at least until I finished my last cigarette, climbed down and went back to my place. Around a year ago, me and my friend just finished university and we had this idea to rent a place where we could work together, because it is really hard to work from home and stay focused. All the places we've checked, though, were pretty expensive and also quite far from Red Hook. Once we were having lunch at our favorite Defonte's sandwich shop, and we just started joking about how cool it would be to do it in this building that, apart from the ground floor of course, has been deserted for many years. Next thing I know, we were talking with the owner, who overheard us and got really excited about the whole idea. 6 months has passed since then, and they just finished the electricity at their new retreat. It couldn't have been done without the help of Nicolas de Fontaine, all the people who joined our fundraising and helped us to turn our dream into reality. I have a really good feeling about this. We meet up every day at work, new people come and go, and it's just around the corner from my place, and we have the best sandwich shop around right below us. Today, after our jiu-jitsu class, Grandmaster Robert had a cool surprise for us. After we were done with our session, he told us to go through the back of our gym to the garden. They had this brand new fence made out of a milky plastic, so you could kind of see through, and we saw some silhouettes behind in faint conversations. We slid the door open, and there was a big barbecue already going on. All of our parents, and also the people who lived around the neighborhood, joined. There were so many kinds of different food, and I couldn't even try all of them. Master Robert told us that it's a special day because 5 years ago on this day they opened this branch in Red Hook, and also that Pat, who owns the place, talked to the people from church and they agreed that we can use the backyard to do some outdoor sessions and gatherings. Apparently they're also planning a summer school. I can't wait. I was looking at this lot behind the fence many times. It was always right next to our gym, but I've never been there until today. I've never liked to do things by the book, but I'm glad they convinced me to do it the official way this time. Otherwise they could have given us a huge fine. So anyway, we just got the permit a week ago, and today we're doing our first public screening of the Red Hook Grid 2022 movie. I'm just on my way home with the Beamer to set it up on the structure that we built with the help of our neighbors and some local companies around 2 years ago. The footbridge goes literally right next to my window, so after we're done, I'm just gonna hide the Beamer in my room and just gonna hit the sunnies with the rest of the crew. I hope we'll manage to get rights also for a couple of movies for our new outdoor cinema. It's gonna be a hit, I can feel it in my bones. The key part of my project lays in this interaction of people on the domestic level of my interventions. People that live in the houses supporting or standing in immediate agency of my proposal. Therefore, I'm offering different possibilities of filtering the porosity of the shared courtyards, private back gardens, and newly accessible empty lots. Sliding polycarbonate fence. This simple system allows its users to control the accessibility of their gardens just by a simple push. Even if they close the doors, there still remains the notion of what is on the other side, because of the semi-transparent texture of the corrugated polycarbonate panels. They create this tension with the curtain-like effect between both sides. You can see silhouettes passing behind, yet it leaves you with a sense of privacy on one side or another. The third dimension of vacant lots is represented by the blind walls of the neighboring houses. The intervention is allowing these blind walls to become a lively extension of the existing environment. By simply creating completely new doors or turning the existing window into a door, the spatial qualities of the house are altered without actually changing the inside of the building. This gate is designed not to stand out of the line. It means it doesn't really differ from the non-movable fence segments, so it merges into one continuous line when closed. When it is open though, it peeks into the space of sidewall just a little bit. Not enough to break a nose, but enough to get your attention and raise your eyes from your phone to let you discover the space behind the fence. It either lures you to step in and take a turn, or it merges with the surroundings, being left unnoticed when you pass by. As said before, in some parts, the newly proposed spinal infrastructure runs next to the existing buildings and creates different relationships between each other. Hereby I describe 3 different possibilities of the coexistence of the added and the existing structure. In this case, the structure is supported by its own vertical support and therefore doesn't need to be supported by the neighboring building. This case is a solution of how to reconnect the facades of the adjacent buildings with its fire escape staircases to the spinal axis, without actually dropping down to the garden of the house with a vertical support. The I-beam is attached to the existing load-bearing walls and it's creating a counterweight to the load that is hanged from it. This way the intervention is executable without the necessity of the vertical support, which would decrease the qualities of the space below. One similar situation as the previous one appears, but there is no possibility to apply the technique of hanging the platform from the load-bearing walls. It can also be cantilevered from the existing wall. Addition of the steel profiles attached to the existing wall into this design solution is supporting the structure. This step also eliminates the necessity of vertical support and the intervention stays more subtle. The last scale of my intervention, where I zoom in even more, is the part dealing with the architecture detail. Here I want to show how I imagine my design to be actually executed. The materiality and also the process itself is based on the whole idea of this intervention. It aims to be a call for action guerrilla intervention. It is something meant to be erected by the people themselves to improve the pre-existing situation, rather than something which is invading it and trying to fit in. This whole project is about connecting the dots with tender and very local approach. Galvanized steel structures where you can engrave your name with the keys of your house, or leave it tagged with a Molotov marker. Metal grade flooring on which you can scrub the dirt of your shoes before you climb into your room. Wires which you can use to let climb the new tomato plant on, because why not to test your gardening skills? I am showing you how I would open the wall of my room to connect it to the catwalk outside of it. Just carefully take out brick by brick and leave the hole as it is to remind me of this change I made myself. The polycarbonate fence would be flying just about 6 centimeters above the ground, allowing a grass grow under it, making it hard to move if you don't use it that much, making it push harder to remind you of not using your back door of your house in a while, just as when the lock gets rusty. The line where the design stops for me and starts for the people is right at the moment they start using the structure. This tender and in a way dry intervention offers endless possibilities of customization and use, which I probably not might even imagine myself. I'm offering the basic framework with the initial intention of reconnection, almost like when you design a bridge and you can't really control the behavior and occasional misbehavior happening underneath it. I illustrate some of the possible scenarios that my design can serve and have also unwrap other possibilities of space it connects. The variety of actions it can host only depends on the imagination of its users. There are no limits. From the more formal and public ones, as in the local market, public screening or announcement, or cultural event, to more subtle and individual ones, as a cigarette break, a date, or reading a book. It can relate to people who live next to it, people from Red Hook who just pass by now and then, and people who are in Red Hook for the first time exploring it by their own, making their own way through the neighborhood like I was back in November 2017.